Welcome to this week's podcast. I am thrilled to be joined by Elizabeth Passarella. Elizabeth is the author of It Was an Ugly Couch Anyway and Good Apple, which was named one of the best books of 2021 by Real Simple magazine. Her articles and essays have appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Vogue, Parents, Martha Stewart Weddings, Real Simple, and Southern Living. Elizabeth is originally from Memphis and now lives in Manhattan with her husband and 3 children. Elizabeth, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So when I was a kid, now I'm 46. So when I was a kid, there was a television show called LA Law that came on, and it was a law firm based drama. And my dad really loved watching this show, and I loved watching LA Law. And so I wanted to be a lawyer. That is what I wanted to be. And I was always a talkative kid. I was always an extroverted kid. I was always a very stubborn and opinionated kid. So, when you have a child like that, especially my parents anyway, they always would joke about, oh, well, you could argue with anybody, or you should be a lawyer, or you should get paid to argue with people because you're arguing with us all the time. So I heard that a lot as a kid. And then my dad watched Law and Order all the time. I just really loved the whole world of lawyers and courtroom and drama and getting to stand up in front of people and make a case and convince people of your point of view. So lawyer was what I wanted to be. That did not pan out. I would be making a lot more money if I were a lawyer. I married a lawyer.
Okay.
But he does not go into the courtroom that much, unfortunately. It would be much more exciting if he did. But yeah, that's what I wanted to be. And then that it did not end up happening. But I always sort of had an idea that would be a fun job.
And how do you think that connects to what you do today?
Well, I still, obviously, in books, I write nonfiction essays, essay collections. And so obviously I'm still putting my ideas and opinions out there. I mean, I'm not trying to convince a jury. I'm not going up against an opposing attorney, but I'm definitely someone who really loves the idea of kind of speaking my mind, having something to say, saying it eloquently. And so I think that in a sense, writing books, especially writing nonfiction books, you're still sort of doing something like that. You're changing people's minds, hopefully. I don't write books that I want to be self-help books, or I'm not trying to convince people necessarily of a point of view, but I do like sharing my personal stories so that people might read them and feel heard or feel less alone or feel like there's someone out there who thinks the same way that they do. And so I do think in that sense, I'm putting forth a point of view and I'm hoping that people listen and maybe people agree or disagree, or they can spark discussion. And yeah, I mean, I think if we're being really honest, I think any author that writes books, especially nonfiction, we sort of like the sound of our own voice to some extent. I mean, we are all a tiny bit narcissistic. We all really sort of think that somehow the world needs our words out in it. So yes, in terms of if I had been a trial lawyer or someone who stood up in front of the court and a judge talking all the time, which very few lawyers I think even do anymore. They're all at desks filling out paperwork, or writing briefs. But those might have a similar thread between them, that and putting my thoughts out in books for sure.
Well, and was it a straight path, Elizabeth, to get to where you are today? To get to writing? So just for the audience, I binged Elizabeth's latest book. It Was an Ugly Couch Anyway. Loved it. It was hilarious. It was so fun. I loved reading it and I connected with it. It was just a fun, relatable, just beautiful read. So thank you for writing it.
Well, thank you so much. That's really nice to hear. Thank you.
So tell us about the path to get to where you are today.
It was a pretty straight path, I have to be honest. I was always in school, even when I was younger, in middle school and high school. Writing was always something that I really enjoyed. I really loved. I felt like I was good at. I had teachers who encouraged me, who told me that I had an aptitude for this. And so it was always a path that I thought would be a part of my career. And I went to college. I went to the University of North Carolina, and they have a wonderful journalism school. So I enrolled in the journalism school. I was a journalism major. And then I worked for newspapers and I worked for magazines for a while when I got out of college, when I moved to New York. So I am not someone who has had a very meandering career path. I have had a very straight, very linear, very step up the rungs of the ladder kind of career path. I started out as an editorial assistant at magazines, and I worked my way up to being an editor at magazines. And then it was a different time. I feel like I do get a lot of people who sometimes ask me now, how do I get started in magazines? And it's a really hard question for someone my age to answer because the industry has changed so much. When I graduated from college and started in magazines, the September issue of Vogue was 3 inches thick. I mean, they were just chock full of ads. It was a golden age of magazines. So when I was pretty young, I decided that I wanted to go freelance and just branch out. I was a beauty editor at the time, which I loved, but I just fell into. It happened to be the job that was open when I was applying for a magazine job. And so I was writing about skincare and makeup and hair care and new spa treatments, which was very fun. Do not get me wrong. But I wanted to do some other things. I wanted to write about food and maybe travel. So I went freelance when I was pretty young. And at the time, I could do that. It wasn't as risky as I think it would be now. There was a lot of work. There was just a lot of work because there were so many magazines and they were so full of words and articles and advertisements. It was just a different time. So I went freelance and I did that for many, many years. Most of my career, I have been freelance, which I have 3 kids. It was a wonderful career to be able to have some flexibility when my children were really young. At times, I would have periods of my career where I would go into an office 2 or 3 days a week and maybe edit a special issue or cover someone else's maternity leave. So I did that a little bit. So I always had my toe dipped in the magazine world. And then I did not start writing books until I was in my 40s. And I'd always really wanted to, but just time-wise and financially, we as a family did not have the means for me to just stop my magazine work for months at a time to work on a book project. It just wasn't there. And I know there are lots of people out there who can wake up early, write for 2 or 3 hours, and then go to their regular paying job where they get health insurance. I am not that person. I am not a great multitasker. I am not great at waking up early. So I knew that if I was going to really commit to a book project, I would have to be able to just take some time off from work and just concentrate on the book. And I just didn't have that chance for a really long time. And that's okay. I think my books are better because I had a little more life experience to share. Everything lined up in terms of friend of mine who was an editor at a magazine that I worked for many years, became a literary agent and reached out to me about possibly writing a book.
Oh my God.
The timing of that worked out really well. So everything just fell into place. I think if I had tried to write a book, and by the way, I did try to write a book in my early 20s and it didn't really go anywhere. And that was probably for a reason. So I think when that opportunity came around again, when I was older, there was less magazine work to be had because the industry had changed. My children were a bit older. Just financially as a family, I was able to just take a few months off to work on a book proposal. All those doors just opened. All those kind of lights turned green in that sense. And so that is how I got to book writing. But in terms of just career-wise, I have really not done anything else. People ask me sometimes, well, what's next? What are you going to do? And I say, I am a one-trick pony. I do not have a lot of skills. I cannot be a teacher. I would get fired. I can't be a lawyer at this point. I think that ship has sailed. So I love writing. And for many years, there were a lot of opportunities to do all different kinds of writing. And so I just rode that wave for a long time.
Oh, I love that though. You've always known what you loved and you followed that all the way through. And all that writing you did for magazines helped make you a better writer for when you did write a book.
Oh, that is absolutely true. I think there were years of my career as a young assistant editor or associate editor at magazines where I spent most of my time when I wasn't doing things for my boss or running errands or whatever it was. I was writing captions, just little captions about a sweater, captions about a lipstick, captions about a retinol cream. And training of being able to be incredibly tight with your words, don't repeat yourself, just that economy of writing these little captions and sort of figuring out how to say something and make a pun or make a connection or make a joke or something in 50 words, literally 50 words, 40 words, 30 words is really good training. It's really good training most of the time. Writing short is much harder than writing long.
Oh, yes.
So having to figure out exactly which word you needed and what is the perfect word and deleting all of those excess words that are not needed was excellent training for being a writer. And so writing a book was actually a really strange exercise for me because to have all the words in the world, you can just have as many words as you want. And I thought, well, I'm used to having to fit things into an outline and a template. And these boxes go next to this picture and you're trying to get a layout to look right. And so that luxury of having all the words you wanted was really new for me. So yeah, magazine was great training.
And what do you think you learned about yourself, Elizabeth, through the process of writing your books?
Oh, wow. I think that I learned a lot about my faults. I feel like when you write about yourself and you write about your family, I write about my kids, I write about my husband with his full permission, write about my parents. I think I always want to be so careful that I am not making myself the hero of the story. It's my point of view. And I am definitely saying things from my perspective and how I felt about situations, but you never want to be able to write about other people and situations where you come out looking better than anybody else when it's your book. So I think I spent a lot of time just replaying certain events in my life. And when you replay them and you're writing about them, it gives you a chance to reflect on where you might have gone wrong, or it's humbling. So I think it's humbling, which is always a good thing. It's something we all need. So I think that is a really wonderful blessing of writing nonfiction is you learn a lot about yourself, and most of that is not going to be great. So that's okay. It's a little bit probably like going to therapy in that sense. But also what I love, and I say this all the time, especially to younger writers, again, my first book came out when I was 44, and my second book came out just this spring when I was 46. I feel like I have stuff to share now. Now, there are women in my life who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s who look at me and say, you know nothing, you young child. And they are right in many, many senses of the word. However, it's nice being in middle age and feeling like I can share. I've been married for 18 years. I've got a teenager. I've been doing this a little while. And yes, I have so much to learn, but I do think it's a really wonderful feeling to feel like you have some wisdom to share, or you can at least share experiences and have enough years of perspective to say, this is going to get better, or this stage will not last forever. This horrible stage of babyhood, that if it's horrible for you, for this reason or that reason, it's not going to last forever. And also the good parts are not going to last forever. That wonderful sleeping stage that your baby is in is going to end in flames. So I like being able to write with some perspective. I think that's a real gift. I love being at an age where I feel like I can confidently say to someone, I have been in your shoes. I have gone through what you're going through, and here's how it worked out for me. And it might not be that way for you, but I can at least offer a little bit of hope or advice or just a laugh when you're in the middle of a difficult situation. So that's, the older you get, the more opportunities you have to do that, which is nice.
Yeah. And the way you write too, again, I know I'm being repetitive, but it's so funny. And like, I just wanted to like, just gobble it up and just like keep, like, it was just fun. And even the title of your book, it was An Ugly Couch Anyway. That's what caught my attention at the bookstore. I was like, oh.
And the ugly couch on the cover. It does have a great cover with a very ugly couch, which is not my couch. It's very similar, but that is not, I tried to use a photo of my actual couch. That is the story, the title essay, the subject of the title essay, but that did not work out. We used something slightly uglier, but very similar. Well, humor is just very important to me. It's important to me in my friendships. It's important to me in my marriage. It's important to me in my parenting. I hope I'm funny. For me, anyway, I think writing about yourself, writing personal essays, writing memoir can feel very self-righteous very quickly if you do not have a sense of humor. So I have read, and I write about my faith some in my writing, and I have read a lot of spiritual books, Christian books that just feel so, I don't know, saccharine or a little bit self-righteous. And I want to be able to write about those serious things in my life. Those things are really important to me, but without ever feeling like I am putting something on a pedestal that you can't laugh at, or that you can't be self-deprecating about, or that you can't have a problem with or wrestle with in some way. So I think a sense of humor for me, especially in nonfiction, is just vital. I have to be able to laugh at myself, or else I think you kind of come out sounding a little bit pompous. So I think a sense of humor is really important.
I know we talked about it a little bit, but the way you write, I think those years of all that writing, it just really comes through. Like, I love to read. I'm reading a few books all the time. I have books just thrown like everywhere in my house. So when I pick up a book and then the writing just like, it's like, it catches my attention of like, oh my God, this is such good writing, and it's fun and it's relatable. There's something really refreshing about that. It's like, oh, I want to read more. I want to find more of this.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, thank you. And also, yeah, there's a lot of books out there that aren't well written. There's a
Right.
lot of books.
Yes.
And I think that there are certain books where there's a place for something where the writing might not be the most important thing. You're learning something or it's a instructional book in some way,
Sure.
and that's fine. That's great. But for me, yes, the best compliment that someone can give me is that they enjoyed my writing. I love when people tell me, this story really spoke to me, or you went through this hard time and I went through something similar. But to say that the writing was enjoyable is just the best, because yes, obviously I don't have another job. There are a lot of writers out there who end up writing a book, but because they first had a hit podcast or something, or they end up writing a book because they were also an amazing decorator or something else where they had another skill and then they channeled that into a book. And that's wonderful. I own those books and I love those books. But listen, again, guys, I have no other skill set. So for me, this is all I do is writing. And so I take it really seriously, and it really warms my heart when the writing is what speaks to people. So it is very, very important to me that my books are fun to read for sure, but also well written. And yes, if you spend a lot of time in magazines and a lot of time back in the day in magazines, your stories would go through 5 or 6 editors at a time, and they would come back. And the way it worked at many magazines where I was employed is different editors use different colored pens.
Oh.
So you knew that purple ink was this editor, red ink was this editor, blue ink was this editor, green ink was the editor in chief. And so you would get your story back. And I mean, of course, we passed around hard copies. And this is, again, the Stone Age. So we passed around hard copies, and you would get different notes and this doesn't make sense, or haha, funny, or maybe a different word choice here or something in different colors. So you would know which editor had said it. And there's just so much value in editors. I'm grateful for my book editors too, but I'm so grateful for the editors over the years of working in magazines who took the time to explain to me why this starting sentence will catch a reader's attention faster than this opening sentence, or why I had an editor tell me once, again, people may disagree with this, but a dear friend of mine who was an editor said she always thought it was lazy to start an article with a question. Have you ever thought about pomegranate seeds or whatever? I mean, it's an easy way to kind of start something. And to this day, there's so many rules like that are just tucked way down deep in my brain that I use in my writing. And I think, oh, don't start with a question. It's lazy. And, it's not. I mean, that was her preference, but it does teach you. We had to go through so many different rounds of edits in magazines that you do just get you develop a little bit of a hard skin and very tough skin, which is important in any writing endeavor. And yeah, you just pick up so many good, valuable writing lessons. So I'm not sure that system really exists anymore at magazines. They're just really different now, but it was really helpful to me.
The other thing that it makes me think of like the book Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. It was like also hilarious, and it was really a love letter to his mom. I feel like, and reading your book, I felt like it was a love letter to your dad.
Yeah. Now, are you talking about the first one or the second one, the Ugly Couch book?
The Ugly Couch book. Okay. I haven't read the first one, but
okay. Well, I talk about him a lot in that. I talk about him a lot in my first book, in Good Apple, as well. In fact, so spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't know my whole story, but my father passed away as I was finishing my first book. And so I wrote about his death in the first book. And then in this book, it was an ugly couch. Anyway, the title essay is about me having to get rid of this couch that was his. He had bought it even before he and my mother got married. It was really old. He bought it in the early 60s, and it had lived in many different places in our family. And then it ended up in New York City with me and my husband. And as we sold an apartment, we ended up having to get rid of the couch, and sadness and tears and hilarity ensues. But yeah, my mother is much more private than I am, for sure. She does not enjoy being written about quite as much as some of my other family members. And she is still alive. So I don't write about my mom quite as much, even though obviously she is an incredibly important person in my life. As I say to her all the time, it is certainly easier to write about someone who's passed away for a lot of reasons. They're not there. You don't have to worry about their reaction. I think when you lose someone, there's just this almost immediate kind of shifting of you hold on to the best memories. You forget about some of the harder things. You forget about the things that drove you crazy. You remember the sweetness a little bit more. But another reason I think it is easy for me to write about my dad is we are very, very similar. My mom and I are really different, which in some ways was wonderful because I think her raising me, our differences complemented each other. And as a mother, the way she was unlike me were really helpful in being a parent to me. But my dad and I were very similar. Personality wise, we were similar. The way we thought about things was similar. We had very similar senses of humor. So when I start to write stories about him and I think about how he reacted or if I've forgotten, it's easy for me to slip into sort of his mindset or to remember really specific things about what he would have said or what he did say, because his words and his way of thinking feel almost like they're coming out of my brain as well. So it's really fun to write about him. It's fun to remember him and be able to write stories about him. They're not all flattering. I write some stories about him. He ran me over in a car,
yes,
you guys. I do write that story.
That's
It was
the one I'm thinking about.
accident.
That one made me laugh out loud the way you started. I don't think he meant to run me over, but like,
No, it was a question that he took to his grave. It was a mystery whether he actually meant to run me over. No, I don't think he did. But yes, so not every story is flattering, nor should it be. But it is easier. It's easy for me to write about him and remember him because I just think he lives in my brain in a way that other relatives don't, because we were so similar and we thought so similarly. So it's fun. It's fun. And he would have absolutely loved it. Whereas my mother does not love to read about herself. My dad would have loved it. So I feel no shame. I feel no worries that wherever he is, delighted to be talked about on podcasts and in articles and everything. He would have loved it. So yeah, but thanks for saying that. It is really fun to write about him. And it is definitely, my books are definitely a love letter to him, a love letter to New York City, and lots of love.
Yes, and that's a good point too. The love letter to New York City. Part of the book, it was an ugly couch anyway, was you writing about finding this apartment, the journey to getting this new apartment in the building you're living in that you've lived in for a long time, and you love the building, you love the neighborhood, and you find a new apartment that you're wanting to buy, and the kind of the story that goes along with that.
Yes.
So me as a reader, I could feel the love for New York. I could feel the love for your dad. And I loved that you pointed out that your mom said, "Why don't you write more about me?"
Yes. I
So
said,
you
when you
address
die, I will.
it.
And the thing is, she doesn't mean it. She just wants to feel the attention a little bit and like the love, but she doesn't mean it. I promise.
But it was
yes,
funny. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, but that was a thought. I was like, I wonder what her mom thinks. And then you address it and you're like, and it just made me laugh. Like, of course mom's going to say, well, did you, I don't know. It was fun.
My mother actually, and I'm sitting in the apartment that we bought. So we bought this sort of hoarder apartment basically in our building, in our old building that we love. And we have moved into it. People are very curious once they've read the book, like, what happened if you moved in? We've moved in. We moved in just a couple of months ago. So it's still pretty bare. There's nothing on the walls. You can see behind me, this is the corner of my bed. We're still trying to figure out where work is going to happen. Zooms are going to happen. But we have moved in. It is just a total miracle. It feels like a miracle. And if you read the book, you will understand why it feels like a miracle. There were so many times where we thought this is never going to happen, or we are never going to be back in this building that we love, or we're going to have to move to another neighborhood. And so it feels really special and wonderful to be here. But
you're never moving, never moving.
We are never moving. Nope. I'm going right out the front door in a coffin, you guys. That's what I'm doing. No. So, I mean, who knows? Listen, I never say never. The minute I say that, something will happen. My husband will say, I got a great job offer in Indianapolis, but I don't think so. I think we are staying put.
So it's clear from this conversation that you love what you do. What would you say to someone? And part of the reason I started this podcast was because I wanted to motivate people who were in roles that they didn't love to start kind of looking for ways to create work or find a role or start whatever it looks like for them, start a company. Or I was in a role in accounting and financial reporting that I didn't love. I wasn't fulfilled. And I pivoted to coaching, executive coaching, career coaching, and I love it. And part of that is doing this podcast, which I love. I get to meet really cool people. And I wanted to motivate my audience to find work that they love and that they feel fulfilled by. So what would you say to a person listening who's thinking, I want to do that?
Well, I would say I'm probably not the best person to ask because I have mostly had jobs that I really love.
Well, no, I think that's great because you have been in roles, which is not common.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, I definitely, when I graduated from college, I worked for a newspaper for a while, and then I moved I was living on Long Island, kind of outside of the city, working for a newspaper out there. And then I moved into Manhattan, and I really wanted to work for magazines. I wanted to be a food writer. And I write about this in the book too. I really wanted to be a food writer. And I interviewed with a bunch of different magazines, and the job that came open, and I needed a job. I had to get an apartment. I didn't have any money to do any of that. So I had to have a job. And the job that came open was the assistant to the beauty director at InStyle magazine. Now you are talking to a woman who I put on lipstick for you today. You can't even really see that. I did put on lipstick for you today.
Thank you. You look beautiful.
But it is extremely rare. And I was a kid who grew up. My mother was a beauty queen. She was gorgeous, loved putting on makeup and all that. And she was always begging my sister and me to please put on makeup or put on some lipstick. And we never did. So you are talking to someone for whom that job was probably not the most well-suited job. And I spent many years as a beauty editor, and I would get promoted. And then I went from InStyle and I moved to Vogue, and I was the associate beauty editor at Vogue. And then I was the beauty editor. Well, I don't remember all my titles, but my point is I stayed in beauty writing, and it was not what I thought I wanted to do. And it wasn't really fulfilling to me in the sense that the subject matter was not super inspiring to me. And I stayed there for several years. And I think a couple of things. I would say the people that I met in those jobs, the editors that I met in those jobs, I am still writing for today. The editors who were all assistant editors, associate editors, we were all kind of at the bottom or the middle of the pack. And those people, because I did my job well, I turned things in on time, I worked hard, I learned everything I could, I listened and I hustled. And those editors, many of them went on to become the editors in chief of magazines. But as we got older and people were promoted, so then I did have the opportunity to write a personal first person essay or a food article or a travel piece for those editors that I had met 5 or 10 years before, who had gone on to move up the ranks. And now they were the people, they were the boss, and they were assigning things. And here I was, someone who they knew could write well and was going to be easy to work with and was going to turn her stuff in on time and take it seriously. So I think, number one, who are the people around you? Maybe focus on the people rather than the tasks. Like, who are the people around you that you can learn from, that can mentor you, that you want to keep in touch with down the road? So as you're looking for another path or looking for a different job, and I was looking for other jobs a lot of times, looking for other magazines, I was still sort of cultivating those relationships. I never took my foot off the gas in the job that I was in. So I think, so often, and this is true in jobs, this is true in parenting, this is definitely true in marriage and friendships and your relationships with your parents or whoever it is. We are not promised comfort and ease. I think so often we are searching for ease. I do this all the time with my kids. I just want things to be easy. I just want you to eat and put your plate in the sink. I just want you to go to bed without coming into my room 6 times and asking me a question. I just want to be able to get home from the grocery store without having to drag you because you're crying because your legs hurt. I just want ease. And I think we do that in so many situations in our life. We just want ease. And life is not easy. And we are not promised that kind of ease and comfort. And there are so many stages of our lives where things are really, the gears are grinding. It is not easy and it is uncomfortable. And I think if we're constantly trying to get out of those uncomfortable situations to find the thing that just greases the wheels and things are easier, we are going to miss a lot. So I think when we're in these uncomfortable situations, and obviously not if you have like an abusive boss, but if you're in just a situation where it is not the most comfortable and it is not the easiest, I think that you're probably there for a reason, and you're probably there to learn something, and just give it everything you've got while you're there and be looking for another job. I took a real big risk and went freelance when I was about 25, and it was somewhat risky. I didn't have health insurance, on and off occasionally for years. So it wasn't the easiest, but I felt like I did not do that until I at least had a little chunk of confidence that the work was there. I'm sure you did the same thing. I didn't leave my steady job at Vogue until I already knew that I had 5 or 10 assignments lined up as a freelancer. And then I kind of jumped ship. So that is my other advice, I would say, is I think that it's okay to work double time for a little bit to sort of build the new thing while you still have the steady thing, and then, make the leap. But you're the career coach. You have much better advice, I'm sure, than I do, as someone who's basically has not had a steady, 5-day-a-week job for the past 15 years.
This is great. And I love that you highlighted that even though you said at the beginning, it's been a straight path, you've been a writer your whole career. It wasn't that you were writing what you loved the whole time, that you were learning, you were building relationships, even if the work wasn't necessarily as fulfilling as you'd wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And then
I got a lot of free haircuts though, which was fantastic. So many free haircuts, so many free facials and massages. So listen, I learned to appreciate the beauty of it. I really did. I missed it once I was gone, but you are correct. Yeah. At the beginning, I thought this is so superficial and
Mm.
silly. It's kind of like in The Devil Wears Prada. She's like, this is so stupid. And Meryl Streep's like, it's not. You know, the cornflower blue is never just blue. And there's all these other people who are involved in this industry. But that is really true. And so I thought that beauty was superficial and silly and did not inspire me. And now I think there's so many lessons, writing lessons, grammar lessons, just
Mm.
really good lessons of my craft and my writing that I learned in those jobs and from
Mm.
those editors. And so everything has something to teach you. I mean, that's the cheesiest thing, but it's true.
Mm. And I love the way you describe when you talk about your craft, because the way you describe it is even the little details, getting better at it, sharpening that axe or saw or whatever the phrase is. Like you're mastering what you do, you're getting better at it. I can hear the love for excellence or for the writing and wanting to be excellent. And that comes through in your writing.
Oh, thanks. Well, listen, I mean, all you have to do is read other people's books, and then you think, oh my gosh, I'm terrible. I should just throw all my books into the flames. You will push yourself to sort of get better because you get inspired by other writers who are doing incredible work. So that has always motivated me. There's certain writers that I love and I read all the time, and I read that and I think, oh, I'm garbage. And so I just want to get better because there's other writers that inspire me to do that. But yes, I think too, if you don't keep improving in that sense, or you don't keep pushing yourself, it gets boring. At the same time, I would say to anybody who's listening who might be a writer, one thing that takes a while to craft, but then I do think once you've got it, you really need to hold on to it, is just kind of your voice. Your voice is really the one thing that you have that is yours. You can write in certain style or craft sentences in a certain way, but it's the way you say them. It's the cadence with which you say things. It's kind of hard to describe, but you know it when you get it. And I do feel like that is something that has gotten more settled and just firm and has kind of become a little bit more solid as I've gotten older. It's just my voice. I can tell when I write something that when it sounds like me, and I can tell when I write a draft of something and it doesn't sound like me. It sounds like I'm trying to imitate this other writer. You know, I think that social media and the way that we write on Instagram and the way other people write has definitely infiltrated our brains. It rewires our brains a little bit. And so I'll find myself sometimes writing and I think, oh, I'm writing this like I'm writing an Instagram caption. I'm writing this like so-and-so writes her Instagram captions, like this tone of voice or this choice of words, whatever it is. So I have to constantly remind myself that I do have a voice and my voice is specific to me and it's clear and I know it when I read it. Yes, I'm always refining to make sure that something sounds like me.
Oh, I love that. Even sometimes when I send an email, I think, that doesn't sound like me. How do I make it sound more like me? So I love that you highlight the importance of voice. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. How can people find your books? How can people learn more about you? Tell us all the things.
On social media, just where we were just talking about. So yeah, my books are called Good Apple, which came out in 2021. And then It Was an Ugly Couch Anyway, which came out this past May in 2023. Those are sold wherever books are sold. And I am mostly active on Instagram. I do occasionally, I've been very quiet this summer. We've had a busy summer, but I'm starting to share a few more pretty pictures of the apartment. There's lots of ugly pictures of the apartment as well on my Instagram. So if you want to see pictures of the hoarding situation and sort of what it looks like now, come find me on Instagram. And I'm ES, there's a sneaky S in there, ES Passarella on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.